Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Crystal. If you're new here, it vlogs about anything that's kind of going on. Sometimes I do a story time, which is kind of what today is, as you can tell from the title. Just a quick disclaimer though, I'm obviously not a doctor or work in the medical field. And so I may explain things a little bit differently, or I may explain them not completely the most accurate. Obviously, again, because I'm not a medical professional, I can only speak from my own experience of what happened to our daughter and just kind of how we interpreted everything happening. So I'll go ahead and dive right in, and you'll see me look down every once in a while. It's because I have my phone here and I'm gonna look at the notes that I have written down, because those first few days were kind of a blur for us, because it, obviously for one, it was traumatic. Secondly, everything happened so quickly. Third, on very minimal sleep. Okay, so our daughter was born February 8th, 8:20 p.m. And that first night, the nurses came in after they wheeled us into our room. They asked us if they wanted us to take her. That way we could get a few hours of sleep before her next feeding, which would be in like 3 hours. And we were like, yeah, sure, like that's fine, no big deal. So we were actually the only patients on the floor that weekend. I guess no one had given birth. So the ratio of nurses to patient was exponentially high. It seemed like there were just tons of nurses available for us. So they obviously had the manpower to watch her, take care of her, especially because this is a night 8:20 p.m. Like it was very quiet on the floor. So they wheeled her out and took her out, and my husband went to sleep. And as for me, yes, I was really tired, but I was also high on adrenaline from, holy cow, I just had a baby, and she came earlier than expected, of course. And just the fact that I can't believe I like birthed a child out of my body. Like it was kind of a surreal experience for me, because I am a new mom. Even though like they had her, I was awake. Not only was I awake because of adrenaline, but secondly because I could hear her crying almost the entire time. It was like an ongoing, she would take a break for like a few minutes and then just start crying again. It was not your normal baby cry. Again, this is my first child, so whenever I did hear her cry, it did seem a little different, because it seemed like it was a high-pitched like wailing. But nurses didn't seem concerned whenever we asked about it, so we just thought maybe this is the way that she cries. So they brought her in 3 hours later. She breastfed, everything was good. She latched right away. She actually latched right after she was born, and they put her on me and they said, oh, why don't you see if she could eat? And she did. She latched right away and was getting that colostrum out as fast as she could, basically. So she was really great at that. So she ate every like 3 hours. I didn't really sleep the entire night, like I said before. And so that was February 8th. So now February 9th evening, like nighttime, I'd probably say starting around like 8 or 9 p.m., which now she's been born for 24 hours. She's a day old, her second night. She started cluster feeding. And when I say cluster feeding, she was probably feeding every 20 to 30 minutes. It was very, very short cluster feeds, and she did this for several hours. She did this for probably close to, I think she started cluster feeding around like 9 p.m. or something, and like went on till like 6 a.m. So that was the second night that we were in the hospital. So again, 1 day old. Now February 10th, about late afternoon, whenever we did bring her home, of course, being new parents again, we had her, they always say like the baby should have on one more layer than what we have on. So she was in a onesie, but then she was also swaddled, and then she had socks and she had a beanie on, which was a lot. So we had her in all that. So by the time we got home, noticed she was kind of red. So we took her temperature, and she had a slight fever. It was like 100-ish. So it was like a low grade fever, but the hospital did tell us not to be too worried unless she has 100.4, and she was teetering around 100. Me being a mom, again, first time mom, nervous, called the hospital, even though she wasn't 100.4 and she was 100. I called them anyways, and I asked if that was okay. And they did say, maybe strip her down and then do skin to skin, and my body should help regulate her body temperature. So we did that, and her temperature did drop. Also that day, the last time that she ate was at 3 o'clock, right before we left the hospital. Again, at this newborn stage, they're eating between 2 to 3 hours. And it was already, I think, like 7 p.m. Now it's been 4 hours, so more 1 hour passed. So during that whole hour between 6 and 7, I kept trying to feed her, and she wouldn't feed. She would push her head away from my breast. She wouldn't open her mouth to latch. She just wouldn't wake up, and she kept just pushing away and pushing away, and she just did not want to eat. So we did call the hospital by 7 p.m. so it had been 4 hours. And so she like said like try to wake her up, use like baby wipes. She's probably just really tired, she's a newborn, blah blah. So we tried doing all of that. Didn't really wake up. She would wake up for a second, but not waking up to open her mouth to eat. So I called one of my neighbors. If you know me, I don't really reach out to anybody about a whole lot of serious help unless you're like a really close friend of mine. I knew she was breastfeeding, so I reached out to her because I did not know what to do anymore. I felt lost. I was scared because I know that she needed to be eating every 2-3 hours and she wasn't. So it was like really freaking me out because I can't get her to latch. Like it's just not working. And I know a lot of people always say like, oh, you're doing everything perfect in the hospital and then as soon as you bring her home, everything just changes. That's exactly what happened. But the thing is the lactation consultants actually didn't really help me too much whenever we were in the hospital because she had such a great latch. She did really great, and I guess like our bond on how like I positioned her and everything was just really good. So I didn't really even get any advice. As a new mom, you kind of question everything. Lanessa was like, okay, well I'll come over and I can try to help you. And this is like around 8 p.m. I was like, okay, perfect. So she came over and we spent forever trying to get her to latch and she just would not. We tried everything. Like tried absolutely everything and she wouldn't wake up to eat. Lanessa tried everything she could and it just wasn't really working. So she went back home and was like, you know, let me know if you need anything. And I called back to the hospital. I'm like, hey, I just had my nurse friend come over and she tried with the latching. It just didn't work. Like nothing is working. And they're like, okay, do you have a pump? And I said, yes, I do. So she was like, why don't you pump and then spoon feed her? And that way she's getting something, because at this point she's still making wet diapers. So she's not dehydrated, but she wasn't eating anymore, and they were worried about her getting dehydrated after all these pee diapers and not eating. So she was like, try spoon feeding, or if you have a syringe, try that. And I was like, okay. So I pumped, and then also what we put on a spoon. So we tried to spoon feed her. Of course, she wouldn't open her mouth. So basically all we could do was stick the spoon in between her lips and just kind of let it drip into her mouth. Luckily, at the very first thing in the morning, we had set up our wellness check appointment, and they just checked their weight because they just don't want to drop more than 10%. Whenever she left the hospital, she was in great range. I think she only lost like 2%. Because all we could do was spoon feed her, the nurse said maybe she's just too tired. Maybe because she cluster fed the night before, and I get it. I was exhausted too. I hadn't slept in now 2 days because she cluster fed the second day, and the first night I had given birth. So I hadn't slept now in 48 hours. Maybe she's just really exhausted, and every time you're trying to wake her and stimulate her with like wet wipes and stuff, like every 2-3 hours, it's just breaking her sleep and she's just not being able to sleep. Like, why don't you give her a couple hours, like stretch longer to sleep, and then wake her up and then see if she'll eat again. So basically that's what we did. And then we let her sleep the whole 3 hours, and I know she hadn't eaten in a really long time, but we needed her to sleep so she could wake up. Yeah, I pumped at midnight, ended up getting like 8 milliliters spoon fed. And then we let her sleep again. We give her like a bigger stretch. So we gave her 3.5 hours this time. So then at 3:30 in the morning, and she's still making wet diapers, by the way. So now it's 3:30 in the morning, and she finally latches and she breastfeeds, which was really exciting. And then we woke her up at 6 a.m. breastfed again. So we take her in. Now it's February 11th. Her appointment is in the morning, and she had actually lost more than 10%. Another reason why I'm making this video isn't just to tell her story of what happened and how everything happened, but it's also to help out other new moms. I questioned myself a lot. I questioned my knowledge and my instincts as a new mom, and I shouldn't have. And neither should you if you are a new mom. If you think anything is suspicious or weird, go with your gut. It is way better to be annoying than to regret later. One of the instincts that I had was actually our pediatrician. So because we gave birth early, we didn't have a pediatrician picked out yet, because we actually went off of recommendations and also reviews. So whenever you do look at pediatricians, my unsolicited advice is to not just look at the reviews, but look at the dates of the reviews, even if it's within the last like 2 years, because I have a feeling she used to be a really great pediatrician, but she cares a little less now, unfortunately. And that's just based on our story. I'm not gonna say her name or where she works, but this is just a story to kind of if you feel a little bit off with the pediatrician, find another one. So anyway, so we took her in, and the doctor doesn't really say anything. Like, they asked what her name was, and she didn't ask our name, if we have any kids, or like any questions about us. No rapport. Did not care to meet us. We literally felt like we were just another number. That was like the first thing that was a red flag. She starts like assessing her, and they weigh her, and that's whenever they find out that she's lost more than 10%. And so as we come back into the room after weighing her, I started explaining to her that the reason she lost weight was probably because she last ate at 3 p.m. and midnight was basically the next time she ate. And while I'm telling her this, she's not even looking at me. Like, whips around and looks at me and just gives me this look and is like, what?
What do you mean she hasn't eaten in X amount of hours?
And I was like, well, listen, it wasn't working. We called the hospital 2 or 3 different times. I even had my nurse friend come over, and she totally just cuts me off, and she's like, I can't believe you let her go that long without eating. And I was like, no, I was trying. Like, she just was absolutely refusing. She was like, she couldn't wake up for it, and she was just like, either she was crying or she was sleeping. And she was like,
I just, you know, that's so irresponsible.
Blah, blah, blah. And now I'm feeling like literally the worst parent ever. I felt like I was incapable of being a mom. So she turns to me and she's like, you know, maybe she didn't have a good latch. I said, well, I had my nurse friend come over and we tried different ways of holding her, and she just didn't want it. And she was like, well, maybe, you know, like, she's like, all these reasons why it just wasn't working, which I get. You want to like try to problem solve, but I felt like I was kind of debunking everything she was saying. Like, she just didn't trust that I was trying more than one way. I was very open to trying different things. That's why I called the hospital multiple times. That's why I had my nurse friend come over, and I took every single person's advice. I'll take all the advice because I just wanted her to eat. And I kept trying to explain that to her, but she just, like, she was talking at me versus to me, or to us. And Anthony was trying to explain to, Anthony's my husband, and he was trying to explain too, like, no, like, we tried this, we tried that. And she just kept cutting us off as we're talking to her. Then she basically said, okay, well, you need to just start supplementing her with formula. I just don't think, you know, that she's getting enough. And I was like, no, like, whenever she did latch, though, she did take in milk, because like I said before, she drank at 3:30 in the morning, and she drank again at 6. And she's like, well, let's do a weighted feed, because I just don't think she's getting anything from you. We already had the weight of her beforehand, and then I breastfed her, and then we weighed her again. So we weighed her, and then we found out that she was taking a full ounce every time that she feeds. And I said, yeah, okay, so I know she's getting something, because something's happening. She was like, I just don't think, you know, she's like, I don't know. She's like, obviously she lost so much weight. And I said, yeah, but I think a lot of it has to do with because she didn't eat during those hours. She's like, yeah, but there's a reason why she isn't latching. So we're just kind of like going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Before we even did the weighted feed, I told her that my milk was coming in. She's like, yeah, no, there's no way. This is like the 3rd day she's born. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure my milk did come in, but, and I know that sounds crazy because most women's milk don't come in until day 4, day 5. However, I cluster fed within the 24 hours that she was born. I started cluster feeding the very next night, and she was born the night before. And I was trying to explain that too. I was like, yeah, she cluster fed like every 20-30 minutes, so I think that's what made my milk come in so much sooner than expected. She doesn't even respond to me, because I don't even think she heard me say that. She wasn't even listening. She wasn't looking at me while I was telling her this. She's just like not paying attention at all. And I was like, so I think that's why my milk came in. And then she turns over to me and she's like, don't forget to take the formula box home. I was upset. I was mad. I was confused, because I felt like there was much more to this. It wasn't that I was just giving up on her trying to breastfeed. I wasn't giving up, and I still wasn't giving up, even though we're sitting here in the doctor's office as I'm holding a box of formula. Not saying that formula is a bad thing, but I really, really wanted her to breastfeed. And I was gonna try, I told myself before she was born that I was gonna try my absolute darnest to get her to breastfeed. That's what happened there. She like gives me this look, and she's like, why don't you try to breastfeed then? And if she doesn't really take, then you need to give her formula. I was like, okay, deal. So February 11th, after the doctor's visit, was whenever you saw that video of my parents meeting Penelope for the first time. After they had left, I decided to have Lanissa come back over later that night, help with latching again, because she would eat and then she would push away. Kind of similar to the first night. I ended up pumping that day, just to get some milk out and maybe trying to feed her via bottle. I had like 1 ounce and she wasn't really taking that either. The doctor told us that we needed to be feeding her every 1 to 2 hours because she lost so much from a couple of days. But I also had Lanissa come over and try to help with breast. But of course I know deep down that if my body is not producing enough, then I'm not going to keep forcing it because it's not enough for her. But whenever I pumped enough. I was kind of confused on like what was happening because she wasn't really drinking, but there was definitely colostrum or whatever it was. We had Lanissa come over and she tried to help with latching again. And she ate like every 2 hours-ish, but she wasn't super great at it. She would unlatch a lot. So we come back the next day and now it's February 12th and we did another weighted feed, and turns out she still also takes, again, 1 whole ounce in 1 feed, even though she was still not meeting the weight that she needed to be. She just needed to be underneath that loss of 10%, and again, she still wasn't. In fact, she actually lost more weight on February 12th than she did her first appointment on February 11th. Doctor was definitely like formula, formula, formula. Mind you, we were put in the same room as the first day that we were there, and the first day that we were there, whenever they shut the door, there was like paint shavings. Like whenever you're nailing something into the wall, drywall comes out and like paint shavings come out. That's basically what was all over the floor in the corner. We thought that was kind of weird. They just remodeled, but it didn't look like it because it was like super old decor. The location of this clinic is nice. However, it was very unkempt on the inside. It really felt like this pediatrician just kind of gave up because we saw those shavings. We're like, maybe it's just, you know, they just did something to it. The next day, whenever we were put in the same room and the door shut again, for me to breastfeed her before the weighted feed, they were still there, and it just looked dirty. So my husband even ran his hand across the paper towel dispenser, and it was just a wad of dust. Like, it was disgusting. So we were thinking like, what if someone had the flu in here and she's a brand new baby? What if she gets sick? That was another red flag. So not only did we feel like she was not really listening to us while we were talking, didn't care to build a rapport, that was 2 red flags. Third, she actually yelled at us and raised her voice when she was mad at me for not feeding her between those hours, even though I was trying to. She told us to use a bottle with my milk again and to pump as soon as we got home, because obviously she was still getting 1 ounce every time she feeds. I think that's probably where part of the problem was, because I was feeding her every 2 hours. She was getting enough milk and she was starting to spit it up because she was getting too much for her tummy to take in. Hindsight, now I know that, but that's what we were instructed to do. We tried to give her a bottle, just like the doctor asked, because at this point it had been an hour since she breastfed in the office, and she said, as soon as we get home, you need to pump, and then you need to put that in a bottle, and if you don't get enough milk, then I need you to start using formula. It's like, okay, pumped, I got enough milk, and then tried to bottle feed her. She wouldn't take it. So then I had my husband go out and get a nipple shield. That didn't work. And I asked Lanissa again to come over at 8 o'clock. Penny's eating a little bit here and there since that doctor's appointment that morning. I was just really paranoid because the doctor was like, you need to feed her every 2 hours, blah, blah, blah. You're not getting enough milk, you need to give her formula. Like, it was just, I was really stressed, and I still haven't really slept yet, because the first 2 nights I didn't sleep in the hospital. The third night I slept maybe 3 hours total because I was worried about not being able to wake up for my alarm to try to feed her at those 3:30 and the 6 o'clock in the morning feeds. And this is kind of where everything happens, because at this point she's 4 days old. And I must say, the last 2 days that we had been home, my husband and I had this weird like instinct. We didn't like talk about it though, but you could tell that we were both feeling it, because neither of us wanted to be alone with her. Like, we were scared to be alone with her. And I think that's like another parenting instinct that we both had. Like, when one of us went to take a shower, the other was really stressed out having her, and we told each other like, you need to hurry. If you're gonna take a shower, you need to hurry. I need you out here. It was just really, you know, and like everyone always talks about like, oh, that newborn stage is so boring. All they're doing is eat, sleep, and poop. But that wasn't the case for us. Like, she was either crying or she was sleeping and she wasn't eating. And she hadn't pooped because she wasn't getting enough food. And it was just like this endless cycle. Like, we just didn't understand like what was going on, what was happening. It just didn't feel right. Like, something was wrong.